Proposed calendar.
The November 26th Planning and Zoning Board meeting is now hereby underway, and we begin, as always, with our adoption of the agenda or any amendments to our agenda. Does anyone have any changes? If not, I would look for a motion to adopt.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Either one, you can take that. All those in favor of adopting the agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. That motion carries unanimously. We have one set of minutes, and that is for our regular meeting, October 22nd. We had no work session, so we only have the regular meeting minutes. Same rules apply, as always. If there are any changes or amendments to those minutes, I'd like to hear them now. Otherwise, a motion would be in order to accept and approve the minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Is there a second?
A second.
Any discussion on that? All those in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. That also carries unanimously. We will move to our first case. We only have one rezoning to discuss this evening, and it is 18 REZ03. We welcome Dylan Paul to our Planning and Zoning meeting for the first time. Good evening and welcome.
Thank you, Chair. And good evening to the board. This case is a rezoning request for a 25.7 acre portion of property located on Pierce Olive Road. The site is currently located outside of Cary's ETJ and town limits, but inside the town's urban services area. There is an annexation request associated with this case, and the map shows the site in relation to the planning boundary between Cary and Holly Springs, shown by the blue line on Pierce Olive Road. Properties north and east of that line are in Cary's planning area and urban services area, and the properties shaded in yellow are in the Cary town limits. The site is east of Pierce Olive Road, about 2/3 of a mile, south of the intersection with Holly Springs Road, and just north of the planned right-of-way for the future Southern Wake Expressway. There is also a Duke Energy Progress transmission line easement that runs diagonally across the southeast corner of the site. The eastern edge of the site is defined by extensive floodplain and stream buffers associated with Camp Branch. There's also a stream shown on the soil survey map across the center of the site. A field determination will be conducted prior to plan review approval. The subject site is currently zoned Wake County Residential 30. The proposed zoning the applicant is requesting is Cary's Transitional Residential Conditional Use District with 11 proposed zoning conditions. The applicant's first condition concerns allowed uses. This slide shows most of the uses permitted in the TR district by right or as a special use. In this case, the applicant proposes to only allow detached dwellings, semi-detached / attached dwellings, townhouses, and neighborhood recreation. Since the semi-attached housing type doesn't appear often, this slide depicts in plain view how they differ from townhouses. Semi-attached units occur in buildings of 2 to 4 units, where the units share a common wall for 1/4 to 1/2 the depth of the dwelling unit. And as for townhouses, each unit is on a separate lot. Another condition caps the number of dwellings at 71, yielding a density of about 2.71 units per acre. Another condition restricts townhouses and semi-attached units to the southern 400 feet of the property. And the next condition sets aside at least 50,000 square feet of open space in the southeast corner of the property on the east side of the power easement, shaded orange on this map. There are 4 conditions related to the design of townhouses and semi-attached units. These include the use of masonry on front facades, limits on front offsets for garages, the use of pitched roofs, and the inclusion of windows on the end walls of the end units. There are also several conditions related to detached housing. First, the minimum lot size is 7,000 square feet, an increase over the 5,000 square foot minimum that's possible in the TR district. Second, the minimum setbacks would be those shown here, all of which exceed the TR minimums. Third, next to the property with the yellow star on this map, the minimum lot size would be 10,000 square feet. Staff evaluated this case regarding conformance with policies from the Imagine Cary Community Plan. The proposals conforms to the plan's main policy to increase the variety of housing town-wide, but less so to its recommendation that small lot and attached housing be sited near daily services and transit. The proposal conforms to the intent of the policy to increase housing choices within neighborhoods so that as families age, they can move through different parts of different types of housing without having to leave their part of town. This site is designated as suburban neighborhood on the future growth framework map. These areas are envisioned to consist primarily of detached homes on quarter-acre lots or larger, unless in a clustered subdivision. Therefore, the applicant's request for 7,000 square foot minimum lot sizes would only be consistent with the plan if it's part of a clustered subdivision. Suburban neighborhoods also allow for limited pockets of semi-attached homes and townhouses. In terms of conformance with the future growth framework, while there is a zoning condition for an additional 50,000 square feet of open space, staff concludes that the proposal falls short of guaranteeing a clustered subdivision. However, the community plan also mentions that suburban neighborhoods should have only limited pockets of small lot and attached housing. This future growth framework map south of 1010 Road shows all existing TR zoning for small lot and townhouse dwellings outlined in black, with the current case in blue. Even if this case is approved, only about 5% of the land south of 1010 Road would be zoned TR. Staff therefore concludes that this meets the intent for limited pockets of townhouses. The Parks Facilities Master Plan recommends a future greenway trail along the east side of Camp Branch, just east of the subject property. The Parks Plan also recommends placing a future neighborhood park somewhere in the general vicinity of the site. However, a site has not yet been acquired. The future roadways map designates Pierce Olive Road as a 2-lane undivided thoroughfare. The plan also recommends the extension of a 2-lane collector street across the northern part of the site. And NCDOT's plans for I-540 currently envision the freeway going under Pierce Olive Road. A couple of neighbors attended the neighborhood meeting on March 7th. Questions were raised concerning the types of proposed housing, the location of townhouses on the site, and the location and size of buffers. No citizens spoke. At the Town Council public hearing on August 23rd, Council asked questions about the timing of the future NC 540, the elevation of the site in relation to the freeway, and the nature of the proposed open space area. In response to those concerns, the applicant revised the zoning conditions to rename the scenic overlook area and to specify amenities and uses for that area. Staff finds that this rezoning request is consistent with the Cary Community Plan because the case supports policies from the LIVE chapter and the use reasonably conforms to the suburban neighborhood development category. This concludes staff's presentation. The applicant's representative is here to offer remarks prior to your deliberations.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We will hear from the applicant now.
Thank you.
I'll just wait a moment while those handouts come around. Or I can introduce myself. My name is Neil Ghosh. I'm an attorney with the Morningstar Law Group, and I'm here representing in my hopes for this rezoning. So good evening, Chair Evangelista and members of the Planning and Zoning Board. Let me start first by thanking Dylan for his presentation. He touched on a lot of the highlights of our project, including our commitment to provide additional meaningful open space. I've handed up some pictures of the area which we have committed for open space purposes. And from the pictures, you can see that the area is very nicely wooded. And we think it's going to make for a great outdoor space. The intent, as was mentioned, is to provide trails from the neighborhood leading to this area to encourage pedestrian activity. We also intend to build an overlook deck with benches or other seating, maybe a swing, and some birdhouses. Obviously, the open space, while significant, is only one aspect of the rezoning. Ultimately, the intent here is to build a residential community with a mix of housing types. Now, the Cary Community Plan specifically designates this area as a suburban neighborhood. Guidance throughout the plan suggests that the predominant use within suburban neighborhood areas should be single-family detached housing. And one thing that makes that challenging on this site is the I-540 outer loop, which is planned to be extended just south of the site. Interestingly, the Cary Community Plan also acknowledges that areas designated for suburban neighborhoods often exhibit the least variety of housing types among the 4 neighborhood categories, which is not a good thing. One of the central aims of the Cary Community Plan is to increase the variety of housing types throughout the town. Doing so allows people to find the types of housings they may need at different stages in their life without having to leave their slice of Cary. The requested rezoning is consistent with that concept. Now, the staff report flags our site not being proximate to shopping, services, or employment as a concern about allowing small lot, townhouse, or semi-attached housing at this location. The reality is that the growth framework map basically designates all of southern Cary, that is south of Penny Road, for residential, and not just any residential, but single-family detached. There are essentially no areas in South Cary which are proximate to other areas in South Cary designated for shopping or employment. So the growth framework map basically does not allow for a variety of housing types in southern Cary. Obviously, that is not the intent of the overall Cary Community Plan, and there are other reasons outlined throughout the plan which support different housing types even in suburban neighborhoods. For example, the Cary Community Plan envisions limited pockets of attached housing within suburban neighborhoods. As conditioned, we have limited the placement of attached housing on our site to the southern acreage closest to the I-540 extension. So within our approximately 26-acre site, more than 1 acre is committed for open space, and only about 8 acres would be eligible for placement of attached housing. And as was mentioned, this constitutes a pocket within the meaning of the Cary Community Plan. Finally, it is important to note that the long-range plans for both the state and the town are at odds with some of the guidance in the Cary Community Plan. For example, it is difficult to maintain a rural feel when I-540 is your neighbor. With the extension of I-540, the character of this area is going to change. It will become less rural, and when it does, the community that we are proposing will be emblematic of the type of development that I think you'll see people wanting in this area. We're not trying to max out the site. We have limited our density to no more than 71 units, which yields about 2.7 units per acre, which is commensurate with densities in other suburban neighborhoods in the town. The reality is that this is a difficult site to develop to begin with. When you add the extension of the I-540 just south of the site, the southern portion of the site becomes even more difficult to develop because it no longer is attractive for traditional single-family detached. The transitional residential zoning we are requesting fits the challenge of this site nicely, and the conditions we have added address the goals of the Cary Community Plan. The whole point of the TR district is to allow innovation in the arrangement of buildings within a development, and that is exactly what we're trying to accomplish here. It fits the call of the Cary Community Plan and will be a successful community in Cary. I want to thank you for your time. I'm available to answer any questions you have, and we hope that you will find this project to be consistent with the Cary Community Plan.
Thank you. You're welcome to stay right there if you like. Does anyone have any questions for our staff or for the applicant regarding this? I'll start on my right.
I don't think I do. I'm not prepared to ask any questions right at this moment.
We can always come back.
Yeah.
No
I'll
problem.
let you know.
I have 2 questions. One is actually just, maybe if staff can help me just understand clarification on a clustered subdivision, and it's just a terminology. I mean, so it talks about this proposal fails to meet that of a clustered subdivision. So I'm not familiar with the definition of what would constitute a clustered subdivision. And looking at you or any of your cohorts behind you, I'm just trying to understand, and the reason I asked it, I'm just trying to understand, it fell short on what we consider a clustered subdivision. I'm trying to look at that, and I'm trying to see, well, what would it have had to have taken, how close was it, and what was the missing elements? So is that?
No, that's a great question, and I think one of our staff members would be very happy to answer that.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, so generally with cluster subdivisions, there would be maybe criteria around where the homes would go, and you would have substantial amounts of open space. So the idea with the cluster subdivisions is you would have small lots, limited infrastructure. In this case, they have committed to a certain amount of open space that's above the requirements of the LDO. The open space, I would not say is necessarily surrounding the development. It's in the the far corner of the lot. So while they are increasing their open space, it's not really meeting the criteria of what we would consider a clustered subdivision.
Okay, thanks. I appreciate that. So if that acreage would have been more central or something like that, now I understand the design element of what.
And yeah, and if perhaps there were some conditions around the location of the units, that could help get to that definition.
Okay. All right, thank you. My second question is regarding, I think it was slide 21 in the transportation plan, and it shows a proposed road, future road. Will the applicant need to, I'm just curious, does the applicant need to make provision for that future road connection, i.e. as in a right-of-way, or is at the time of the site plan?
Doug Loveland with the Planning Department. That would be determined at the time of development plan review.
Okay.
So if the alignment at that time is determined to be optimal through the applicant's property, they would be required to provide that right of way as part of the subdivision process.
Okay, thanks.
But as you see, it's a dashed line, so the exact location, of course, is yet to be determined.
Mm-hmm. Understood. Thanks. I don't have any other questions.
I think I have like two questions. The first one is, I can't remember, it might have been slide 17. Was that the one that showed what had been approved close to this? I'm trying to, no, it's the one that showed this one. So right now today, what other townhome communities are in the pipeline that have we already approved, or is this going to be a precedent once we do this for this area?
Are you referring to this area as shown on the map?
Yeah.
Okay, to the best of my knowledge, this is the only townhome community rezoning proposal in this general area. There are others proposed throughout the town, but
Right. I'm just talking because this. I'm trying to get some clarification on. This is really shown as being a suburban neighborhood, which, if I understand it correctly, means it does not have that. Everything is detached. There's no townhomes. And I'm just trying to get, is this going to be a precedent when we do this? I don't know that we've approved something like this before,
so,
but I could be wrong.
As mentioned in the Cary Community Plan, limited pockets of attached housing, including townhouses, are permitted in suburban neighborhoods. So again, this map shows around 5%. Naturally, that well, it's slightly lower than 5% now. If this plan were approved, it would approach 5%. I think it's around like 4.2, and it'd be about like 4.7, something like that. With regards to precedent, if additional townhome communities were proposed in this area and would require rezoning, you may want to consider looking at this map again and seeing which ones, how much that percentage would increase. But as it stands now, staff feels that around 5% meets the definition of a limited pocket.
Okay.
Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah. And my second question was just, want to understand some of the conditions here.
Okay.
If we approve this the way it's presented tonight, does the applicant have the opportunity to make it all townhomes? If later, or are they locked into the mix that we're seeing here?
So they would be permitted. Let me go ahead and get those zoning conditions.
Okay.
So the zoning conditions as written now say the only uses allowed on the property shall be detached dwellings, semi-detached / attached dwelling, townhouse, neighborhood rec center, and any associated accessory use. I think the applicant might want to speak more to exactly what they're proposing on the site. Maybe you could ask, go for it.
Yeah, so I'm not sure which slide it was. There's a slide in here that shows the 400-foot location. So only south of that line, that's the only location where we could have attached housing. Well, that would be townhomes or semi-attached housing. The rest of the acreage would be, we would be required to do detached housing. The intent here is to do a mix of uses. So if we only develop the portion in that 400-foot line, then I guess you could say technically, yes, the whole thing could be townhomes, but there would be a whole portion of the site that wasn't developed. If we're, the most likely scenario, the whole site's going to be developed. There's going to be some townhomes in that portion south of that 400-foot line, and the rest of it's going to be detached single-family housing.
Okay, but would they need to come back in and see us again if they decided that this whole project would be townhomes, or
Yes.
you'd have to come back again?
Yes. If we wanted to build townhomes north of that 400 line,
100%, the whole thing's townhome.
yeah.
You'd have to come back.
Right.
Okay,
Yes, that's correct.
okay, that's it, thank you.
I have a question for staff regarding the one of the zoning conditions. It's actually the condition marked E or labeled as E in the staff report.
Okay.
I guess it seems kind of an oddly worded zoning condition. I'm just wondering what the purpose of that actually is.
So this concerns architectural conditions, and this language is essentially legalese for how they would be required to implement these architectural conditions.
Okay.
So you have I believe you're referring to the first paragraph.
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And we've seen before in other rezoning cases where there actually is architectural standards provided as zoning conditions, but I just hadn't seen the wording with
Go for it.
the declaration of covenants and conditions and things like that.
Yeah, so, and I've seen those conditions as well that don't have this nonsense about declarations. But we've been working with staff on this, and I think from here on out, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that will be the intent going forward. So what it ultimately does is it puts the enforcement of those architectural conditions on the HOA rather than the town. So the town isn't going around policing it, and the HOA does. So it is enforced because the condition says we have to put it in our declaration. But after that, the town is done, and the HOA can handle it from there. That's the intent of this type of
Gotcha.
wording, and I think you're going to see more and more of that.
Okay. No, that makes perfect sense for me. Thanks for clarifying.
Anything else? The only question I've got involves the open space, and I'm sure I've seen it before, but that's that hard line, that easement of some sort. Is that utility lines? Is that buried gas lines?
That's an overhead transmission line, I believe.
Overhead transmission lines, okay. That's all I had.
I had a question. There seemed to be information that that there is a schedule for 540 to be under construction by, I forget the date, 2023 or something of that sort.
Yes, I have some info on that. So there's a design build contract in the works for spring summer of 2019 with the DOT, and then completion is anticipated in 2024 of the 540.
So staff feels fairly confident that that's a realistic schedule and that's something that is going to happen.
At this time, that's the information we have, and that's what we believe to be the case, yes.
Okay. Now I'll ask you one other question in this. I just did not understand about preserving historic resources and preserve historic context. The staff said that it seemed to be conforming with those requirements. I didn't know what we were talking about.
Sure, I understand. So there are no historical structures on the site, so it would be conforming because they're not in any way endangering them or anything like that.
Okay, I was thinking the opposite, that maybe there was something historic on the site.
No.
Okay. I have no other questions. Great.
I don't have any questions.
Mine have been answered. Okay. Second bite at the apple.
I don't think I have any questions. I was just a little concerned that area, if you guys have ever driven that area around the morning or the evening, it's a cluster of traffic there. And anytime that I hear of a higher density project in that area, it's concerning about what's going to be put into place to alleviate any additional traffic that's going to go through there. But I don't know if it's an appropriate question or not, considering, I mean, there's a distance between Holly Springs Road and 1010, but it's still a nightmare traffic-wise. I don't know if any studies had to be done with this or...
So we have capped the total number of units on the site at 71. The initial study of that indicated that there weren't enough peak hour trips to warrant a traffic impact analysis or a TAR, a traffic analysis report. So the only road improvements that I feel confident about would be any road widening along the site's frontage. Aside from that, off-site improvements, none were required, and no TAR was required. So I couldn't speak to
Okay.
some of those problematic intersections that I'm familiar with.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions at all? All right,
I'll make a motion.
there we go.
I move that the board find case number 18 REZ03 is consistent with the comprehensive plan and all other applicable plans for the reasons set forth in the staff report, presentation and discussion by the Planning and Zoning Board.
I'll second it.
Any other discussion? You want to add anything else to it on this side of the room?
I think this is going to be an area that's going to be in a lot of transition in the coming years. We look at it now, it's very rural, but we know what's going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years. We're going to see a suburban development. I-540 is going to change the landscape of that. Looking at the map, there's going to be a major interchange a little bit to the west of that, I think at Holly Springs Road. So some of the traffic issues are going to be perhaps alleviated. Kudos to the applicant for being the first one in asking for townhomes, because it'll just make it, as it comes before us in the future, we will have the ability to put the brakes on if there's more coming in to keep that suburban feel. I appreciate this, in our plan about the wanting to be close to amenities, and there'll be a balancing point as we move further and further. We see that as we go out to the west. I mean, my quick research is there's 4 supermarkets within less than 2.5 miles of this site. And so it's not like it's a food desert by any stretch of the imagination. So there's opportunities for.
There are no food deserts in Cary.
No, we have taken care of that very well. So, I mean, I see that. I think it's also, given the proximity to I-540, the proposed area, I think it's a good use, and I think the applicants put together a smart proposal with where they're locating and, in the density issues. They've got the density is also driven by a lot of things they have to do on that site. But anyways, that's my 2 cents.
Anything else?
I think it makes sense in this area, as we've discussed in previous cases. Around the destination centers, we're going to have a higher density. It makes sense. We've got a YMCA there. We've got all kinds of shopping and stuff there. 540 is going to be coming through. My only concern was the traffic, but it's going to be, 3-4 years, and then it shouldn't be an issue given that 540 is going to go through. So I just think it makes sense.
Does anyone else have any discussion points on this?
I have one comment. So I intend to vote yes for this, but I do want just to make a note that I am concerned about the suburban neighborhood definition. And because of 540 coming through there, that's kind of what persuaded me to do these, to think the townhomes are probably okay there. But I was really concerned about, that's why I was asking earlier about could the whole place, go to townhomes? Because, to me, this area and I agree with what you were saying, there's going to be we're going to get more requests for townhomes here. And I just want to kind of really not lose track of the definitions. It's supposed to be suburban neighborhoods according to the plan. So just for the future.
Okay. Anything else?
I'll sort of second that comment. It's not always safe to disclose your thought process, but I started reading through the materials and thought, what the heck are they doing? And then I saw the 540 line coming through, and I said, okay, I understand now. Mm-hmm. So it flipped me completely in the thought process. So that's why I would vote in favor.
Okay. Anything else? Would all those in favor then of 18 REZ03 please say aye?
Aye.
Any opposed say no. That motion carries 8-0 unanimously. Thanks very much. We move to Act 7, LDO amendments. And Ms. Glover's here to talk to us about those.
Good evening. So if I'm here, it must be good news, right? Right. So we're here to ask for your opinion on amending the LDO in response to some actions by the FCC I'll talk about in a second. But the purpose of these amendments, you see us put this chart up from time to time, is to stay in legal compliance and to make some technical clarifications to the small cell ordinance that we actually just adopted about a year ago, last December. So the FCC adopted an order and published it in October. It becomes effective about 90 days after, and that puts the effective date at January 14th. And this reflects the FCC's continued push to accelerate wireless deployment. And the way they're pushing and accelerating that is by restricting local government regulation of small cell wireless installations. So we are not allowed to materially limit or inhibit the ability of wireless providers to compete in the marketplace, to introduce new services, new technologies, expand services, that sort of thing. That is the new standard that they have put in their order. This order does not supersede the state law that we talked a lot about last year at this time. We have to figure out how to comply with both, which is a bit of a challenge because, for one thing, they define small cell differently in the two orders, the order and the state law. So it's kind of a mix and match and piece things together and figure out how to comply, and we're working on a lot of that internally. A lot of that does not require LDO amendments, but there's a lot of internal work we're having to do. The order will force staff to further prioritize these applications. I talk about this more in the staff report, but really the big change for staff is not reflected in your LDO amendments, but it's that they have to review all of the applications that will start to come in within 10 days and determine if all the information they need is there. No other application that they look at has that sort of requirement. When a subdivision plan comes in, when this project comes in the future, they'll have all the time they need to look at that plan and decide if it meets requirements. For small cells, they'll now only have 10 days to make sure they have all the information they need. And then past the 10 days, there are further shot clocks, as they're called, that force staff to make decisions within shortened periods of time and forces these applications to kind of jump in line in front of some of the other things that we might want to work on. So the amendments that we're proposing in response to the order, we're updating the purpose statement to incorporate that new standard I talked about, materially limit or inhibit. That, you know, we're saying we're not trying to do that. The purpose of these regulations that we have is not to do that. We're refining the definition and explanation of stealth and concealment requirements. The FCC order requires that all of your aesthetic regulations be published in advance. Ours already are. We published them last year, but we wanted to just kind of tweak and update the definitions a little bit so that everyone can say they know what we're looking at when we're saying things need to be stealth. Because of the short time frames, we wanted to codify in the ordinance the time frame that applicants have to resubmit an application if we tell them it's incomplete. We don't want it to be just hanging out there and then come back in. So we put a hard time frame on that. And finally, we are codifying a state law requirement that we can require them to begin installation within 6 months of getting approval and to be complete within 1 year. And we're also making sure we know what the method for granting an extension of time to that is, and that's in response to a recent request we had from an applicant who wanted an extension of time, and we realized we didn't have the ordinance clear enough on that point. So we've added that in as well. At the Town Council public hearing, which was just about 2 weeks ago, no citizens spoke, and we've made no changes since the public hearing, and Council just had a few general questions. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions that you have.
I'll start on the left side this time. Do you have any questions about this? Rachel?
I don't think so.
No questions. I think staff's done a good job with this.
The only question I have is, could any of these things, these changes, subtle as they may be, that we're making for these particular applicants, bleed over into other types of applications we may get from some other thing? Could someone conceivably come down the road and say, well, you're doing it for tower or little cell centers, I should be allowed the same rules? Is there a potential for that sort of thing, or have we walled that off sufficiently?
So I think in the ordinance we've walled it off. I mean, I think people can always say, why are they getting better treatment? And of course our answer is, because we have to give them better treatment. But I think in the ordinance, the changes we're making are limited to small cells. They're limited to just this technology and this particular land use.
Thanks. Keep on rolling.
No question.
Seems like I had the only question in the whole room.
Yeah.
All right. So, does anyone have a motion if they don't have a question?
I have a motion. I move that the board forward LDO Amendment Act 7 is consistent with the comprehensive plan and all other applicable plans for the reasons set forth in the staff report, presentation, and discussion by the Planning and Zoning Board.
Have we a second?
Second.
Do you have any discussion you'd like to put forward?
I just want to say I'm glad the staff's proactive on this and staying on top of this. I mean, I can definitely respect the challenges associated.
Anything to add?
No, just the same. It looks like a good job of lawyering to me.
From a lawyer.
I'm not going to add another thing to that. Would all those in favor of Act 7 of LDO amendments, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. That motion is also 8-0 and unanimously carries. Thank you very much, Ms. Glover. We move to our new business for the evening now, and first is the adoption of a work plan. We have before us a copy submitted by the Planning Department. I don't know if there's any presentation or discussion behind it. If not, it's here for you to comment on. I'll just point out, having gotten this a little bit earlier, you have page 1, and for those of you at home, I guess you're just going to have to trust me on this. The second page, you can see the red line strikeouts. It is basically to reflect the changes that we have had placed on us sometime last year about what we can and cannot do, and it just more clearly, I think, restricts things. I would point out that the entire second paragraph where it says we can carry out the following powers and duties as directed by town council, we would have to be directed to do any of that stuff, whereas in the old way, it was kind of maybe suggested we could launch off on a study on our own or something like that. We now wait to be told what to do on that sort of thing. Does anyone have any comments on that? Because we can change this, kick it back, and then bring it up at the next meeting if you like. Anyone at all? I believe we have to make a motion to approve this work plan, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct?
I think that's right.
All right, well then, I think I'd know that by now. It's probably in the work plan, and I just didn't notice it. But I'd be looking for such a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the Planning and Zoning Board's 2018-2019 goals and work plan.
That's very well done. Any second to that?
Second.
Any discussion at all, Tom? Dan, nothing at all? Nope. Off we go then. Would all those in favor of approving the 2018-19 work plan say aye?
Aye.
All those opposed say no. There's another unanimous one for us. The final item on our agenda is our calendar. That does not require a motion. It's simply put forward to the members for you to take a look at that calendar. If there are any changes that you would like to see made, especially in light of attendance requirements for us. So if there's something that clearly gets in the way of you attending one of these meetings, please let our staff folks know about it, and they will try to make a change if at all possible, or will somehow accommodate that. Does anyone have any questions about what we're looking to do for the meetings?
I had a question on the calendar, or a comment. And
Go right ahead.
I may be the only person. The only thing I saw in there that little bit got my eye was the Thanksgiving week. We have a meeting on the Monday of Thanksgiving week. I do not know how that impacts folks. I know the town is probably closed at Thursday, Friday. Most businesses are closed. I just don't know if people travel that week or if that will be an issue for anyone.
What's the flexibility on that? I mean, can we ask to move it to the 18th instead of the 25th?
Sounds like we just have. Yeah,
Well, I
I
don't know
think
what
there's,
flexibility is
we
on it.
typically have that 3rd/4th Monday of the month, and this year it just so happened to come after Thanksgiving. Next year, we have the latest Thanksgiving possible. This year, we had the earliest.
I mean, since there's not a work session really that
Right.
we're dealing with now, it to me, there's a little bit more flexibility since the work sessions are going to be random.
And is it the same thing for December? Am I reading this correctly?
Oh, I might have missed that.
No, December's the 16th.
I think December
16th? Okay.
That's, yeah.
So I'll tell you what, we'll ask that if it's possible for you to take a look and see if that can be done.
Good evening. Yeah, you can suggest that, and we can make that change tonight.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we'll see a revised schedule, right? Sometime through email or something like that, I suppose. We don't.
Yeah, the clerk will pass it along.
Okay, excellent. So We'll just look.
January 28th is my birthday. I just wanted the board to know that. But I will plan to attend.
Figure out who brings the cake.
Yeah, I believe there's.
So
Lobbying for a
do we need 49 candles on that cake?
That's right. That's right.
So we'll get the, we'll just get the agenda emailed to us, and it'll be published as all. I should also point out that we typically have work sessions scheduled in the calendar, and I'll just mention this because it was brought forward to me earlier. We're not scheduling them on the published calendar any longer. They will be put out as, on an ad hoc basis. But if there were to be a work session, for those of you who are marking your calendars up at home right now, they are almost always the preceding Monday to a regular meeting. So if we were to have one, it would be highly, highly reasonable that that would be the date it would occur. And otherwise, I don't, we have one for every two we don't have, it seems. So they're just scheduled as required. Does anyone have any comments or anything you want to add about the schedule? Any other kind of new business you want to bring up, since we've hardly ever used this part of our agenda before? If not, then we will move to the next session of our agenda, which is good old-fashioned adjournment. And I'd be looking for a motion for that.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That was an easy one. That's also unanimous. We are adjourned for the evening. Good night. I can feel that one's...
This has been a production of Cary TV. Visit the Town of Cary's website at townofcary.org.